Okay. Hi, everyone. I think in the interest of time, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome. Thank you all for joining me today. My name is Erin Rees Clayton, and I am Associate Director of Science and Technology for GFI. Um, I cannot see the chat as I'm sharing my screen, but please do feel free to put any questions that you have either in the chat or in the Q&A section of Zoom down at the bottom of your screen. I'm going to present a few slides and then we will have plenty of time at the end for me to address any questions that you have. So with that, we will go ahead and jump in. So the purpose of today's call is just to provide an overview about different careers and jobs in the alt protein space, and certainly answer specific questions that you all have. My plan is to give a brief overview of GFI and what alternative proteins are when we use that terminology, and then talk mostly about what career fields and relevant backgrounds are for the alt protein field, and then share some GFI resources related to jobs and careers in this space. And as I mentioned, we will have time for Q&A at the end. So if you're here, I'm guessing you know some about GFI, but just as a brief introduction, we are a nonprofit organization. And our overall mission is to develop the roadmap for a sustainable, secure, and just protein supply. And we do that through three primary programmatic areas. The first is science and technology, and that is the department that I am part of. And so our science and technology team really works to try and identify what the technical barriers are facing the alternative protein field. And then we engage with scientists and researchers in both academia and the private sector to get them working on those important scientific questions, and also work with research funders to educate them on the importance of funding this work and try and make sure that there are resources available for those scientists that want to do alternative protein research. GFI also has a corporate engagement team. And our corporate engagement team works with companies and investors, from food companies to life science companies, investors all across the world, to really accelerate innovation and drive investment and scale up the supply chain, and hopefully do this in a way that is faster than what would happen if left to market forces alone. And our third programmatic area is policy. Our policy team advocates for fair policy for alternative proteins, a level playing field from a regulatory perspective, and public research funding for alternative proteins. And we do these activities around the world at this point. We are now a team of over 100 staff in 6 different regions. So I am based in the United States, but we have GFI teams in Brazil, India, Europe, Asia Pacific, and Israel. And our theory of change in a nutshell is to make something people want. So meat is a very important part of people's diets. And after years of public health experts and a lot of effort to try and change people's behaviors, our theory of change is that the best way to get people to eat a healthier, sustainable, more just food system is not through telling them not to eat meat, but giving them what they want. And so giving them delicious meat at a price that they can afford, but that is just produced in a way that is better for people, animals, and the environment. So we focus on alternative proteins and how they can be used to make meat, egg, and dairy products. So the core alternative protein production platforms that GFI focuses on are plant-based meat, egg, and dairy. And so as the name suggests, these are meat, egg, and dairy products that are made from plant-based proteins. We also work on cultivated meat and dairy. So this is where animal cell culture is used to produce actual meat that from a molecular standpoint is the same as animal meat, but is done without the need to raise and harvest whole animals. And then the third platform is fermentation-derived ingredients. So this is using microbes like bacteria or yeast to grow recombinant proteins, or use the microbes themselves as a source of biomass for meat alternatives. And so these are the three primary technology pillars that we focus on. And I wanted to just kind of zoom out and make sure that we're thinking about the entire alternative protein value chain when we're thinking about careers and job opportunities in this space. As a scientist, I spend a lot of my time really thinking about research and development and what are the scientific questions that we need to ask, the research that we need to do in order to advance alternative proteins. But if we really want to make sure that we are getting plant-based meat and cultivated meat and fermentation-derived proteins to consumers where they can purchase them in grocery stores or at restaurants, there's way more involved than just the research and development. And so I think that this entire ecosystem helps us think about the fact that it's not just about figuring out how to make those products. We need to think about the upstream supply chains, the production processes, what are the end products that we're manufacturing? How are we going to distribute those products? Who's investing to make sure that this industry continues to grow and scale? And then what are all of the enabling factors, such as workforce, different business services, compliance issues, everything that we need in order to really build this industry. And what I think is exciting is that there are opportunities for jobs in all parts of this ecosystem. So next, I want to shift more into talking specifically about, what are some career opportunities and relevant backgrounds for people who have an interest in alternative proteins. And so I think the first thing, and again, my background, I was in academia prior to joining GFI, and as someone who was working towards a PhD, I think I often saw the rest of my life being in academia, and certainly there is a need for that. But I think it's important to realize that there are lots of opportunities beyond academia if that is not something that seems of highest interest to you. So what I've tried to do here is just think across the different sectors where we see careers for alternative proteins. And so certainly in academic settings such as universities, there's a need for additional research, teaching to help train the alt protein workforce. And I think we shouldn't forget about extension activities. So particularly in the US at land grant institutions, the extension activities are really the outreach to communities and other stakeholders. And for alternative proteins, that could be farmers and existing food and ag workers to really make sure that we're bringing them into the fold and engaging them with what's happening in the alt protein sector. From the industry standpoint, so B2C means business to consumer and B2B means business to business. So B2C companies are companies that are producing products that are intended for the general consumer, whereas business to business companies are those who are creating either ingredients or equipment or things that other businesses will use. And so we hear a lot in the media about some of the startups that are creating these new plant-based or cultivated or fermentation-derived meat products. But it's important to realize that it's not just those companies, it's also the B2B companies that are making the ingredients and different supplies and equipment that these companies need. And so there are, as the industry grows, we're seeing a lot of startup activity. There are more and more jobs and internships with startups, but also established companies, both in food as well as life sciences, particularly for cultivated meat. And then also on the investing side, so there's a lot of activity happening with venture capitalists and other types of organizations that invest in startups and industry. On the government side, there are government research opportunities in alternative proteins. There's also all of the policy and regulatory aspects. And the funding side. So governments typically have a lot of employees who are involved in research funding. And as we continue to see the alt protein space grow, we hope that there is more and more government funding that is going into alt proteins. And then last but not least, nonprofit opportunities exist. So as I mentioned, GFI is a nonprofit. There are other nonprofits around the world who are working with alternative proteins, and the types of jobs that exist at these nonprofits can be quite different, but again, can kind of range from the science and technology to more on the business side to the policy. So it's important to realize that those opportunities exist as well. As a young and growing field, there is still a really drastic need for technical expertise in the alternative protein industry. And GFI hears quite frequently from companies working in this space that it is difficult to find people who have the technical expertise that they're looking for. And so I've tried to just think of a few different kind of more traditional areas of study that people can have, and how they might be applied to the various pillars of alternative proteins. And I think what this demonstrates is that there's really a role for people with a wide variety of technical backgrounds to find a place and a use for those skills in all three of these technology areas. So again, you know, we're thinking about cells and proteins, and if we want to biomimic animal meat, it's really important to have an understanding of the properties of actual animal meat. So I think we sometimes get questions from meat scientists, is there a role for me? And I think absolutely. So anyone who's working on proteins or biochemistry or protein chemistry, again, there's a lot of role to play in understanding how we can get plant proteins or you know, microbial proteins to mimic animal meat. Certainly on the engineering side, the tissue engineering, mechanical and chemical engineering, to understand how we can structure cells in a way that's going to make the shape that we want for meat, as well as thinking about all of the equipment that is needed to produce these products, and different ways that we can, you know, further develop that equipment to be more automated or have sensors to try and recycle as many components as possible. You know, I think there's a lot of need for engineering. And then also on one of the areas that I think is particularly exciting is to think about how data science and computer science can play a role in helping us understand the vast amount of data that's starting to be collected, and really figure out the best way to utilize all of the information that's being generated to pull out the insights we need to advance these fields as efficiently and effectively as possible. But thinking about that whole ecosystem slide that I showed a few slides back, we need to realize that it's not just about those technical fields. If we really want to build the entire alt protein ecosystem, there's a lot of additional expertise that is required. And I've tried to come up with a fairly comprehensive list on this slide, though I'm sure there are things that I am missing. But you know, want to stress that there is definitely a need for people with public health backgrounds, nutrition science, environmental science to help us understand, you know, what are the health and environment impacts of these products. From a sociology, economics, rural development standpoint, you know, what does it mean? Where can these products be produced? What does that mean for existing food and ag communities? Culinary science, these are food products. How can we prepare them, cook them in ways that will be appealing to people? And how can we develop regional flavors? You know, that's different regions around the world have different preferences for flavors and the types of food that they like to eat. From a consumer science and a marketing communications side, there's really a need for people who can understand the science and technology of these products and be able to communicate it in a very accurate and accessible way. Public policy and law, again, we've touched a little bit on that, but figuring out how these products are going to be regulated, making sure that they are on a level playing field with other products. Whoops. Certainly then, business and entrepreneurship, thinking about how we actually translate some of the research into the private sector, and, create products that can be sold to consumers. Investment and finance. Again, we need the money and the capital to be able to scale up this industry. And then certainly logistics and supply chain management. These products are resulting in some new supply chains. So it's not trivial to figure out how you grow the crops and turn them into protein and make the product, and what that all looks like then, thinking about not just producing it, but getting the products to consumers as well. So why is it an exciting time to consider a career in alternative protein? I think the industry is at a place, it's really grown quite a bit in the last few years. I've been with GFI for a little over 4 years now, and I think we've seen really just an explosion of interest and growth and development in the field, but it's still very, very early on. So I think we're at a stage where the ecosystem has grown enough that you can find support and the partners that you need, but there are still a lot of white space opportunities to be addressed. And so that means that there is really the potential for tremendous positive impact across many of the critical cause areas that alternative proteins address. So whether you're passionate about animal welfare or environmental issues or public health, or all of those, there's really, I think, an opportunity to do something that is going to make a positive difference in the world, and that certainly makes it easier to get up and go to work on the days where that feels difficult. And I think there's also an opportunity to become a leader in your field and really create a successful career. Because I'm in the science, it's easier sometimes for me to think of examples in the science and technical space. And so just one thing to point out, a lot of tissue engineers right now are working in the biomedical field to really try and figure out how we can create, organs for human heart transplants and things like that. And again, that's a very noble cause and good career, but the number of people that are working on doing that, I think it makes it a lot more difficult to kind of carve out a special niche for yourself. Whereas, we have a lot less tissue engineers who are working in the cultivated meat space currently. So really an opportunity to become a leader. And then I love learning new things. And so I think that it's really exciting to be in a young field where we're constantly learning new things. There are new developments and feel like we're really on the cutting edge of technological development. And then the final thing I'll mention is just the opportunity to work at the intersection of so many disciplines. And for those of you on the call who are students right now, I think this is maybe something for you to really think about, what opportunities may exist for you to get some training at the intersection of disciplines. So going back to the tissue engineering example, most tissue engineering programs don't have any food science classes available for their students, because if you're working on making an organ for human transplant, you don't think about flavor or how it tastes. But for cultivated meat, that's critically important. So, really getting to develop expertise in tissue engineering as well as flavor and food science is something that, not many people have done to date. And on the plant-based side, it's similar, thinking about people who are plant breeders, crop breeders, plant genetics, but not just understanding the crop as a whole plant, but thinking about all of the downstream parts of the process for making plant-based meat, and really how by getting training in all of these different parts, you're kind of putting yourself in a position that not many people have gotten to experience so far with that training. In case there are a few people on the call who are interested specifically in what it's like to work at GFI, we do have several positions open right now. I invite you to visit our careers page to learn more about GFI and view our open positions. And we also have general hiring information sessions every other Wednesday. The next one is March 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern. I will share, excuse me, I will share my slides with you all after the presentation. And so you'll be able to click on the links and the resources that I'm going to share. I'm happy to answer questions about what it's like to work at GFI in the Q&A session, but just wanted to let you know that we also have this opportunity to specifically talk with other staff at GFI about any questions you have. And so finally, before we move into the Q&A, I just want to share a few GFI resources that are related to alt protein jobs and careers. And for those of you that may have been connected with GFI for a while at this point, we did just launch a new website in the past couple weeks. Here is our homepage, so it's just at gfi.org. And the hope is that it's now a lot easier to find what you're looking for. So on the homepage here, if you're mostly interested in science, this is a great place to start. More on the business side, here are industry resources. Policy resources can be found at this tab. And then if you, on the Engage tab, you can click that and get to our careers page. So I invite you to take a look at our website and certainly take advantage of the resources that we have there. And certainly if you're looking for something and can't find it, please feel free to reach out to me or someone else at GFI, and we'll certainly try and help you do that. But wanted to just highlight a few resources that are particularly relevant for people who are thinking about a career in alternative proteins. If you're a student, I invite you to check out our student resource guide. We've really attempted to try and create a fairly comprehensive resource that talks about everything from, you know, what should I study? How do I get involved in this field? How can I find an internship or a job? How can I find research funding? So this might be a good place to start to get some of those initial questions answered. I think it's also fun to hear people's stories that are in this space. And so we do have our Pioneers of Science resource, which is just a series of interviews that we've done with scientists who are working in this space. And they talk a little bit about their background, how they got to where they are now, what they're doing, some of what they, you know, especially like. So that can be a fun way to just see the different paths that people have taken as well. And one thing just to point out is that, you know, there's no one path to get to a career in alternative proteins. It's going to look very different for everyone, and again, particularly for a field that is so young and new, where you can't necessarily get a degree in alternative proteins. It's going to look very different for everyone. So that can be exciting, but also challenging. So hopefully these stories from other scientists will be valuable. We have our alternative protein career portal at gfi.org/vocation. This is where you can find our careers board. So job openings, internship opportunities that we are aware of in the alternative protein space get put on the careers board. So you can check that out if you are currently looking for something. Also on this page, you can find our talent database. And this is where, if you are you know, interested in getting more involved, you can enter your information, and this talent database gets shared with companies and others who are working in the alternative protein space and looking for new people. So sometimes that can be a way to get connected as well, if you have particular skills that you would like to offer to the alternative protein industry. And then also from this page, you can get more information about our GF Ideas community, which is our global community, primarily of scientists and entrepreneurs working in alternative proteins. And again, this is just a great way to get connected to the people that are working in this space, to share ideas, learn about opportunities they have, and really get more engaged with the community. Specifically on the entrepreneurship side of things, we have our startup manual and our company database. So both of these can be good resources. The startup manual is a little bit analogous to the student guide in the sense that we've tried to create a fairly comprehensive resource. So if you're interested in starting a company in this space, it can at least help you get started on the right track for the types of things you need to think about and consider, and what resources are out there to help you. And then the company database, which is growing by the day, it seems like, contains information about the companies in the alt protein space that we're aware of, and just gives you some information about who they are, where they are, what they're working on. So that can be a good resource to take a look at. And if you find a company that looks interesting to you, you can go to their website and check if they have any job openings or internships available. And last but not least, if you are in an academic setting, we have several resources available to help you either connect with other scientists. So on the left here is our collaborative research directory. This is where scientists who are interested in collaborating and working in the alternative protein field can put their information, and so it can be a great place to go. Sometimes, they'll indicate if they're looking to hire or if they have internships available, but can give you a sense of who in academia is working in this space. And then if you are interested in research funding, our research grants webpage has information both about GFI's research grant program, so we offer research grants, as well as our funding database, which is non-GFI funding opportunities. And you can filter that database by cultivated meat or plant-based meat or your geographic region to see if there are any opportunities currently open for research funding. So with that, I'd like to stop and just say thank you all again for attending and your attention. I'm going to